We are stuck at this stage here. We need a personal access token to push our latest commit to our public repo. As we just learned on the slide, we as repository owners could now of course create a personal access token and share this access token with the person who wants to work together on this project with us. But with that, this person would also have access to our entire GitHub account, and that's probably not what we want right here. Therefore, we need an alternative. And this alternative brings us back to our GitHub account. Remember, if we go back to the starting page, this account is the owner of this GitHub Basics repository. If we now go to our repository and now go to the settings once again over here, and now enter this manage access option, this one here, then we see who has access. So the repository is public and visible to anyone. We talked about this in a lot of detail. But then we also have this direct access option over here. And there we see that 0 collaborators have access to this repository and that only you, so we as the owners, can contribute to this repository. This is what we want to change now. We now want to make sure that another GitHub account has access to this repository and can contribute, so for example, push commits to this repository. For this, we can manage access down here and invite a collaborator. Here you can now find for the username, the full name or the email of another GitHub account. In my case, I'll use another account I have from Academind. So if you want to follow along, make sure to create a second GitHub account. Then you can also simulate this on your own on your machine. So I'll use my Manu Lawrence account right here. So this one, so as I said, please don't invite me here, use your own account. With this, I can add this other account to this repository right here. Now you see that we have a pending invite. So this account now received an email which he can access and with that confirm that he wants to collaborate in this project. So this is what this invitation looks like. So we can now view this invitation here. So here we are. I'm now logged into this user account where I sent the invitation to. So only this user account can then view this invitation. And if I now accept it here, like this, then you see, and you also get the confirmation up here already, that we now have push access to this repository. So just to make sure we are on the same page, here on the Edge browser, I think it's the easiest way to see it is this not syncing button up here. This is the invited profile now. And here, if I go back to Chrome, where we have this M up here, this is the actual owner account who now invited this collaborator. So if I now reload this page here, you see that Manu Lawrence is added as collaborator, and therefore we now know that we are not the only ones who can now push to this repository. Nevertheless, we still have a problem because in VS Code, to push our change, we still need the personal access token. But now, as this other account here has push access to this repository and therefore is kind of part of this project, we as account owners don't have to share our personal access token to our account with this collaborator, but the collaborator can basically create his own personal access token, which then grants him access to his GitHub profile. But as his or her GitHub profile has access or the access rights to these repositories, well, the push is also working with this logic. And that's exactly also the logic behind GitHub here, behind this whole security and access thing for personal user accounts. Therefore, let's go back to the collaborator account once again. In here, there we access our profile by going to the profile, to the settings. There we scroll down to the developer settings, go to the personal access tokens, and create a new one. You can ignore this token, this existing token here for me. So we generate a new token and I'll call it git course access, git course repo access here. It can expire in 30 days. And I'll simply say that we have access to the repository, basically to all these topics. We don't need admin access once again, but basically all the other rights we can add. So as you see, besides the admin rights, I ticked all the boxes. I'll now generate this token here. Now copy it. Now go back to VS Code, to this connect to GitHub will pop up. Paste this personal access token and sign in. And now you see the push was hopefully successful. To see whether this worked, I'll now go back to the owner account, so to the Chrome browser here in my case. Go back to my repository and see that we have 3 commits in here now. And if I access these commits, you see that we have our first 2 commits here, and there we have the last commit made, by the way, made by the same name here. This is just related to the fact that although I deleted the token, so the connection between Git and GitHub, I'm still working from the same computer with the same Git, username and email. Therefore, don't get distracted by that. If I would use a different computer, then of course also a different name would be added right here. So this is how we can add collaborators to public repositories. As a next step, we'll have a quick look at how this works for private repositories, and then we'll dive deeper into organizations in GitHub. We saw that for our public repository, by adding a collaborator, we can basically give this person the entire access to our repository, including read access and also write access. This means as a collaborator, we can now push our changes, our commits into this public repository. The question is, what changes if we turn this public repository into a private one now? Therefore, I'm back, or I'm actually still in my account, so the actual owner account of the repository. In there, I'll now go to Settings and scroll down to the danger zone we learned about already. And in this danger zone, we'll now change the visibility over here from public to private. Remember that we have the other account, so my Manu Lawrence account, added as collaborator. So let's see if this has any impact onto this account and the corresponding access this account has. Therefore, by clicking onto Change Visibility, we learned about that logic already. We can now select the Make Private option down there. And then again, copy or type, as you prefer, the account name and the repository name into this field here. And then we change the visibility. This change was successful. Now we have a private repository in here. And if we go to Manage Access, we see that still, the collaborator aspect is of course unchanged. So let's now go to the other account, to the account that is a collaborator here, and let's see if this has any kind of impact onto the way this account can now interact with this repository. So I'm back in the other account, in the collaborator account. And by the way, in the left part here in the repositories, you see 2 new repositories. These are related to the next module of the course. We worked on this module in the meanwhile, but I decided to keep these repositories in here so that you can also see what it looks like if you have multiple repositories in your GitHub account. Important though, for the purpose of this module, still this GitHub Basics repository is the important one. Now, as we see the repository right here, we can actually also select it. So let's do this. and there we see no big changes. We still have access to the branch, we can click into it, we see the files in there, and of course if we go back, we can also explore the commit history. This was the commit that we made as a collaborator in the last course lecture. Of course, if we would go to this repository now without being logged in, the repository wouldn't be visible, but for us as collaborator, we only get the information that this is a private repository. But if I would try to push an additional commit to this private repository now, which we can actually do, so I'm back here and I'll just add some text into this test.txt file we created. I pushed this to the private repo, for example. If we save this and if we add this commit and commit it with a commit message of pushed to private repo, then if we run git push, let's see if this works. Yeah, no warnings, nothing like that. We see that we updated our repository on GitHub. So if we now go back to my owner account and go back to the repository code over here, we see that this new commit I created, push to private repo, was added. And if we inspect the commits, we can of course see that this was created by myself. As I said, we got the same name here for both accounts. That's due to the fact that my local settings on Git are the same. I explained that already. To summarize that though, the difference between a public and private repo for a collaborator is non-existent in the end. Of course, the visibility is a big difference. So if you're not a collaborator of this project, the private repo won't be visible for you. But if you're collaborating, well, you have the same rights in a public and in a private repository. This brings us to another, issue we should have a look at now.